Our final speaker tonight, I'm very excited, Miguel Martinez from Signal, again, our generous host this evening. It's often said that talent is the most important thing in AI and kind of alongside data, the lifeblood of success. So really fortunate to have Miguel talk to us about how to attract, retain, and build a team.
Thank you everyone for coming, and apologies for the 35 degrees temperature. There is ice in there as well, and there's drinks that we can have afterwards. So let's start with switch hands. Yeah. So before jumping into the slides, I wanted to give a bit of context of why I believe I can tell something about my experience over the last 6 years. So Signal started with a very simple concept, very difficult to implement, as someone said before, which is companies understand really well their internal metrics. You know the ARR, you know their LTC, you know all the metrics for the company inside. The challenge is many companies don't understand the external factors which affect you every single day. So you don't understand, business leaders tend to not have a good understanding of the risks in your industry, with your competitors, what's coming, what's trendy, what's not, worldwide, real time. Sometimes we don't also know the opportunities which are there because we don't see things that if we had access to all the news in the world, all the regulation in the world, everything someone talks and says about your industry, you will change your decision making. So what we try to do is to empower business leaders to make better decisions by taking all the external information we can and using artificial intelligence to process that. So we process millions of documents, mainly text, so that's news, regulation, social media, etc. And we help people understand their space better. So over the last 6 years, we went from 3 people in a garage. So I was lucky enough to be one of those 3. And now it's 150 people in 3 different countries, including a data science team of 9 people. So this is basically my war stories about all the things we did well and all the things we didn't do well over the last 6 years, which is a bit of both. So first of all, we all, I hope in this room, understand AI will change almost every single vertical and industry in the world. We know it's the new electricity or the new oil or the new uranium, as I seen a couple of days ago. And I'm sure someone from Gusto will be happy to see the second quote from the CEO. I took that for the playbook. But my challenge for you is the fact that nothing matters unless we have the right talent. AI by itself doesn't work. You need people to pull it off. You need people to design a strategy. You need people to understand the data. You need people to understand the business problem that the technology will help you solve. Without that, it's just an exercise. So I'm going to try to go into the 4 stages that I believe are important to understand the talent, find it, assess it, and keep it in the company as a company grows and evolves. And I have also a couple of myths in there. Some are more cheeky than others. So I've heard people saying you only can have data scientists who have a PhD. I have numerous counterexamples with that. Also, people say you have to be with one of the top 3 universities in the world. Again, I'm not saying don't hire people from those universities. I'm saying talent is worldwide in very different shapes, forms. Don't judge people just because of that. And data scientist is, or used to be in 2012, the sexiest job in the century. It's still very difficult to hire data scientists worldwide. And I'm sure some of you have struggled with this. So how can companies find talent these days? And this is obviously almost line by line from the playbook, but I can give my angle on this. So recruiters is the obvious one. You treat it like any other job, and you use a recruiter, and you obviously pay a fee, and you have to go through a process. My one tip in here is obviously some recruiters work better than others. That happens to developers, happens to product people, is what it is. However, I would very, very strongly suggest to go with specialists on AI, data science, machine learning. Going through CVs and understand what you want in a space where what a data scientist is already a very fuzzy term. You probably want to go with someone who understands the space inside out. The other option, which is a great one, and it's not only great, the company was founded because of that in a way, is going to meetups. So the 3 co-founders of Signal were met. We met in meetup.com, or more specifically, our CEO spammed us to the other co-founder and myself on the natural language processing group people and CTOs in London group. There is a lot of talent and a lot of people going to these meetups. And especially if you are in a part of the UK or a part of the world, there's a lot of meetups, like the southeast of the UK. That's amazing. You might have some challenges, maybe some meetups don't work, maybe the people doesn't match what you want. You will always learn something. And the last one, but not the least, is conferences. So I have probably found half my team and 75% of the collaboration with the universities in conferences. That includes academic conferences, that includes industrial conferences. That's a very important, we have learned the most by being in both. And also, we work a lot with text analytics. So the information retrieval community and the natural language processing is our natural habitat in a way. We have found that actually expanding the horizons more and going to, in our case, more pure machine learning conferences or more pure predictive analytics actually gives you the extra angle as well. So sometimes we have to be aware to not be in your own echo chambers in a way with conferences as well. I would suggest to go to conferences even if you're not hiring and even if you're not speaking, because that over time builds the branding of the company, and that helps massively. I mean, we built to a point that we will go to especially text analytic conferences and they give us CVs without saying, oh, you're Miguel from Signal. I'm like, great, who are you? And someone told this person that we did a collaboration with them in Australia, and then that person now is a postdoc in Paris. So the mouth-to-mouth is very important in what is, I would argue, to be a relatively small community. So I'm very, very passionate about bridging the gap in a way between the academic efforts and the practitioners and basically AI apply. And obviously, I'm not the first one who has said that even today. The best research, as long as we don't continue stealing researchers from academia at the same rate we do now, will still be at the universities. And the question is, how can we make the best of both worlds and take the academic knowledge, bring it into the company? In our case, we've chosen to do it in 3 different ways. One is we collaborate to do master thesis, mainly with UCL and Essex universities, mainly in the UK, because it's simple, you don't deal with visa problems, but we can pick very clearly a problem which is interesting for us, interesting for a student, will give us publications, and it will give us either not new interesting research lines or something directly applicable to the top priority. So we're a bit more generous on what we could be working with universities. Also, 3 or 4 of those master theses end up being full-time employees with us at some point or another. So it helps hiring as well. The second one is what I call visiting researchers. So the idea here is to target the best people in specific fields, the best person in summarization, the best person on clustering, the best person on whatever technique we believe is useful for us, and convince them that we want to kidnap them for 6 months to a year, squeeze their brains, keep the IP, but we will give them the feeling and the impact and the example that they can use their research to solve a real problem. That's priceless. For being a researcher myself, after 4 years doing a PhD, if someone tells you this will solve a problem, someone is paying for that, you will be surprised how many times you will say, oh, yeah, I'll give it to you. It's not as cheeky as that, but there's something that you have a win-win situation between the impact, the applicability, the commercial experience, the teams where you work with developers, which is something we do as well, and it's something that researchers value a lot as well, because it's not that common in academia. And one of the things that, again, there is a difference, well, we found a difference between the best universities generically and the best universities and lecturers in your field. Those two might or might not be correlated. So sometimes it matters more who is the person you're dealing with or you're doing research with at university rather than the university name. And I'll leave it with you to judge which ones are good for you. I don't want to say any names. The last point is for the ones of you who are in London or around, just take advantage of that. I believe, I haven't run the numbers, I believe it's the highest density point in the world by the number of universities within a 2-hour radius. You can visit 15 top universities from here in an hour with the public transport, as long as it works. So take advantage of that. In other parts of the country or the world, that's not the case. You have to take 3 planes to go to 10 universities. So that's working well for us as well. So the next one is you know where to find the talent. How do you measure if they are actually good, or how do you ensure that you have the right talent? So again, the myth is this stereotypical data scientist working on a dark room, doing modeling by themselves, and suddenly they give you a USB under the door and you put it in production. That, with very few exceptions, never, ever, ever works. But some people still believe that's the way to work. And once you go into a product mentality, that's very, very difficult to pull off. So starting with a not so easy question, what is a data scientist? And this is something that the playbook touches in a much more length than I do in here. The answer is it depends. Every company has a different definition. So what I've tried to do here is put the names that I've seen in the space in 5 different categories. The first one for me would be what the playbook defines as well as someone answering questions, mainly based on internal data, which is the one I usually have seen and we refer to as product analyst or data analyst, people who are really good at understanding if new things you put in the product have an impact, understanding your data, understanding your metrics, et cetera, et cetera. Some people actually name those data scientists as well. In our case, we call them data analysts. The second one would be the people who have a strong data science background, but have a product and user mentality. So they are thinking about, this is a problem, and these are all the tools I have. How can I make this sure I can solve the problem? The main focus is quick iteration, measurement. Again, they have to be very strong technically, but by our definition, they should not go into the extra 0.5%. They should try what are the things that work. Let's see, go to the users, evaluate, iterate again, very much in an agile model. And I've seen names like data scientists, sorry for the type of research, shouldn't be there, product data scientist, product engineer data scientist, something that says product, or usually data science tend to be in that category. The other thing I should have said, most of the times titles are deceiving. You should focus on what is the role description, the job description, what is the person going to do. That tends to make more sense. And if you want to go one granular more, you can be a natural language processing researcher, you can be a visual researcher, deep learning, et cetera, et cetera. The next block, which is a very big one, it's some people might disagree, is when we have the people who help productionize the models as quickly, as robust, and as better quality as possible. Now, these people work all together or should work all together in teams, but there are people with more expertise than others. So these are the people who traditionally we call machine learning engineers or data engineers, et cetera, et cetera. And then we have all the strategic direction and management, which I know is a very, very big bucket, but anything to do with heads and VPs and CDOs and CDS, et cetera, is the people helping the direction of the company. Depending on how advanced in terms of age the company is, you might have the VP of research doing all the coding, like we have been back in the day, several of us, but that's the main principle that we have seen. So stealing another image from the divergent state of AI, page 82, I think, I'm not sure, is basically what do data science want, and is it different than anyone else? So one of the things that I've underlined the ones in red, which is learning, impact, and publishing opportunities. Because I believe those are the things which are unique, or at least to that intensity, unique to data scientists and researchers. It's very difficult to keep talent in data science and research if you don't provide a continuous learning environment. Now that means freedom to read papers, that means learning from your peers, that means going to conferences, et cetera, et cetera. If you don't provide some level of learning, people will leave. That's my argument. Impact is the main thing that make people come to Signal and not go to or Gusto or companies. Well, you guys are bigger than us, but and not going to the Facebooks and the Googles. And it's very difficult. The more you grow, the more difficult it is for you to make an impact. And this was one of the challenges as companies grow to remain being impactful for the data science and the researchers. And publishing opportunities, we have published papers every single year since the foundation of the company in our field, in text analytics and information retrieval. That has given us massive kudos in the community, and it has given us a lot of hiring. So we are trying to, it was really good that this links very well to what we have seen over the years. And then other things are what I would say that applies to every role. So office environment, technology, compensation, management, et cetera, et cetera. So we know what the data scientists want. What do we want from them? So, and usual first line is don't focus only on technical knowledge. So technical knowledge is a given. Don't hire someone who doesn't know how to do stuff. But that's not the only check. So given the fact that we work, we are trying to solve a business problem, we work in a team of multiple people with multiple skills, things like communications and collaboration, within other researchers, sorry, with other researchers, with other people who are not researchers, with externals, and with the business as a whole is absolutely critical. Because if not, you will have people solving their own problems, or people saying, but this is a really cool problem to solve. Yeah, but that's not the problem we're solving. Because we are curious by nature, and we like to do research, and the next thing that is shiny, we like to try it, because that's how research works most of the times. If you cannot speak with people to understand if that connects to the business and it connects to the vision of the company, it's very easy to end up in a rabbit hole when you do amazing research on a theoretical way or in a completely different corner of the world in terms of where you are thinking about. And one of the things that I think is very important as well is diversity, and I say multiple dimensions. So one of the ones that we found really, really good, it's we hire, 3 of us come from a background in text analytics. So the next hire, we very explicitly wanted someone not from an IR background, because the 3 of us, if you give us the same problem, we can come up with a slightly better or worse solutions, but the point of view and the perception and the angle will be very similar. Because we have similar backgrounds. Once you put someone with a physics background or biochemistry background, people who know how to do data science, their point of view is completely different. They see problems in a different way. Now, there's a balance between people who can talk together the same language and people who have different perspectives. So balancing those 2 out, if you can do it well, it gives you the massive impact, because it's new ways of solving a problem that you're able to communicate with the rest, and together you solve it as a group. So that's working really well. And yeah, one small tip for me is, for very early stage companies, it's better to have what we call full stack data scientists, someone who can create prototypes end to end, who have some level, potentially not a specialist in an area, but can do any of the standard kind of machine learning techniques, whatever is text or audio or video, because you don't really know what you're doing yet. So you will pivot 17 times, like we all have that. And having someone who is a generalist, who can create prototypes and discuss things, is at that point, I argue, much better than having a specialist on, say, deep learning for text. As you grow, obviously, that opens more. So I will go through this very quickly. I think it's reasonably standard. So the way we do the interview process, we have a CV screening. The point here is be careful not to be biased. Again, don't check only people from Oxford, Cambridge, and Imperial. Try to be a bit more open-minded. We do a phone call for general alignment, understand what they want, really flagging red flags to see if there's something that doesn't make sense. And then what we do always, despite having publications, all our researchers have to code. If you cannot code and you cannot code something that will go into production, it's not for us at the moment. We are not at the stage where we can have people in a corner writing papers. So we have an open exercise where we give them some of our data, which is publicly available anyway, and we tell them to do something which is an open-ended problem. So not only we're evaluating their coding expertise and their research expertise, we're evaluating what problem do you really want to solve exactly? Or how do you want to, obviously we give them some guidance, but it's relatively open. So that tells you way more about the person. Do they focus on the visualization? Do they focus on a very complicated model? Do they focus on a slightly different take on the problem? So that's by itself useful. And then we bring them to a face-on-face interview where the main point is they are assessed by data scientists and researchers in the data science staff, engineers on the code, business people on hypothetical business scenarios, and random people from the company and culture. So if only data scientists hire data scientists, you might have a problem. I will almost say predict that you will have a problem. While if you involve many people in the company from different profiles, the chances that that person will sit well in the organization and you will flag culture mismatch will be much higher. But obviously it's much more complicated to pull a 4-hour interview with 7 people. So now you have found the talent, you have lots of data scientists, what do you do with them? So again, going back to something that someone mentioned before, you cannot just get a deep learning postdoc from Cambridge, put them in a room and, oh, we have a product that does AI. That's not how it works. It takes a lot of work, again, to take AI principles and apply them to a business model and to solve a problem. So a slight question to the audience, which is, do you have a clear problem to solve? And do you have data available, or do you know where to get the data from? Because if you don't say yes to the first 2 problems, chances are a data scientist arriving in the company will be like, okay, so what do we do? I've seen that before, or they don't have infrastructure in place. meaning you cannot access the data in a way that it takes them weeks to find it. They will be frustrated, and they will be confused, and potentially they might leave. Now, some data scientists like this ambiguity and this kind of very, very, very early stage companies. That's how I started. But most of the people tend to like to have a defined problem, at least to some extent. And yeah, that's basically a question for the audience to go home with. And if you have the data and you know what to do, the question which has been, I've been fighting with this one for 6 years. We tried every single one of these and every variation between the three. So how do you structure your data science in the company? Depends on what do you expect from them. So if you have a standalone research team, you will have an autonomous team. They will believe they are a unit. You are their research team. And then you will do a lot of amazing research, but you might research the wrong things. Because by being an independent team, you collaborate less with, say, product lines and other teams, by definition. But you have AI as the first-class citizen, which gives you some benefits, obviously. The embedded model is you still have a team, a group of people who do data science, but you rent them out to other teams. It's almost like a consultant model, which works well at one point, which is you utilize all the data scientists you have in a very optimal way. The problem is ownership is a problem. People go solve a problem and then come back. It's not really what most data scientists want, I would argue. And it's a challenge because if you have self-sufficient teams and then you send a consultant and take them back, it's like, well, we're not really self-sufficient, are we? So that's a challenge, and it's very difficult to attract the talent. So the integrated teams is when you have a combination of developers, data scientists, UX, UI people in the same teams. That works really well on quick iteration and understanding if you're solving problems with data science. But one of the things you might change, or you might lose, is this idea of we are a research unit. We all together work in long-standing breakthrough in machine learning. So, as I said, we tried them all. We failed, the three of them at some point or another, apart from the consultancy, actually. We didn't try that one. What we are doing now is going into the integrated solution for most of the teams, which is all of them have, each one of the teams have a very specific goal in mind. And with that, you have a combination of data scientists, product people, etc. But one of those happened to be the data pipeline team, which has two major goals: the speed and efficiency of our tagging, and also the quality of the models. So that, by definition, is a very, very strong machine learning focused team, which at the moment is doing most of the long-term research. It's almost like a research team, but not completely. And the product teams are focused on iteration value in as quick iteration as you can. On top of that, we actually have a very strong research guild. So we meet every week. We have, it sounds funny, we have a research page, we have a unit, we are a unit, even if we're not in the same team. And there are things we do as a unit outside our own teams: publications, reviews, papers, etc., etc. That gives enough of the best of both worlds for us and allows us to do very quick iterations, which we need from the business point of view, and very long iterations that allow us to do the cutting-edge research that we need for the business as well. And I just put a piece there from Daniel Tunkelag, which is part of the inspiration of these three, and I keep reading his blog post once a year to try to understand a bit more, just in case you want to have a look. So retaining talent. So you build this amazing team doing all these things. 3 years go by. How many people are still in there? So again, the myth is hiring people is tough, but once they're in, they never leave. Well, they do. And just to add more complexity, one of the things I've seen, again, not only in Signal, but outside as well, is technical people, from my point of view, don't tend to nag, they tend to leave. So they don't tend to come to you, I'm not happy. Some of them are, well, you're not treating me well. You should have treated me well before, but you didn't tell me well. You should have known. It's more likely than not compared to commercial people, for instance. Commercial people tend to come to you and say, I have this problem, I might leave unless we do something about it. So my argument to how to keep the talent is a simple yet not a simple one, which is just make sure that the reasons that made them join you are still there. Sounds easy? Well, sounds easy if you're exactly the same company you were 3 years ago. Once you start growing and the problem you're solving is slightly different, and I don't know everyone in the company anymore, and I don't have time to work in that paper that I really want, you have to be very careful that the recognition is still there, that the time for learning is there, so all the factors that we discussed before. Obviously, things change. You get a higher salary, you probably have a much more focused goal, but there is things to balance it out. Because, as I said in the previous slide, you never know how much you need someone until decide to leave. And in our case, yeah, so basically we keep working on very interesting problems, keep going to academic conferences, which is a massive thing for us. And we keep giving them the impact. That's the main factor still, which obviously the more you grow, the more challenging it gets. So my final 4 points is make sure you have a clear problem. Without that, we have a problem. Hire for more than just technical expertise. I cannot emphasize this enough. You need people who are not just great machine learning people. They need to be great communicators. They have to be evangelists for the company. They have to come to you with amazing new ways to solve problems you didn't know you had. And then make yourself, if you really want to grow as a name in your own field or in AI as a general, go to events like this one. And then understand and take care of your people. Obviously, that applies for all the company, not just data scientists. That's just for the focus of the talk. And yeah, the company is nothing without the people who are there, as we all know. So just make sure they still there and they do the best they can.